Sometimes a stranger enters your life for only a few minutes. A conversation, a warning, a single sentence, and then they are gone years later. You remember almost nothing about them, not their name, not their face, not where they came from. Only what they meant, as if the person disappeared. But the significance remained, and that raises an uncomfortable possibility. What if some encounters are not meetings at all? What if they are messages, wearing human form? Welcome to Mysterious Encounters. Tonight, we open another entry from the Veil Archives in our previous archive. We explored archetypes, the recurring figures that appear throughout history. The hero, the shadow, the trickster, the sage. But what if these patterns do not remain confined to stories? What if they occasionally step into reality? Not as myths, not as hallucinations, but as encounters. Tonight, we examine the symbol people, entities that seem less like individuals, and more like meaning itself, temporarily given a face. The accounts often begin the same way. A person is lost, confused, standing at a crossroads in life. Then someone appears, an ordinary stranger, nothing remarkable, nothing supernatural. Yet the interaction feels strangely precise. The stranger says exactly what is needed. Not more, not less. A sentence, a warning, a question, a piece of guidance. Then they leave, and despite every effort, they are never seen again. The details fade, the meaning does not, years later. The encounter remains vivid, not because of who the person was, but because of what they represented, as though they arrived carrying a message larger than themselves. Across cultures, certain figures appear repeatedly. One of the oldest is the woman in white. She appears on roads, near water, at the edges of forests, at thresholds between places. Sometimes she warns, sometimes she guides, sometimes she simply watches. Descriptions vary. Stories change, yet something remains constant. She feels symbolic, less like an individual, and more like a presence attached to a moment, a manifestation of transition, a figure appearing when one chapter ends and another begins, whether folklore, memory, or something stranger. The pattern continues again and again and again. Another figure appears throughout human experience, the silent guide. The person who arrives during crisis says very little, yet somehow alters everything. These encounters often occur during periods of uncertainty, moments when life seems suspended. Between one version of reality and another, the guide appears, offers a direction, then vanishes. What makes these stories unusual is not the advice itself, it is the timing, as though the figure emerges precisely when needed, not before, not after, only during the threshold, only while the door remains open. There is another recurring presence, one surrounded by mystery, the man in black. Not necessarily threatening, not necessarily benevolent, simply unsettling. He appears during moments of change, moments involving knowledge, moments involving questions. Witnesses often describe the same sensation, not fear, not danger, but significance. As though the encounter carries weight beyond ordinary explanation, the figure behaves less like a person and more like a marker, a symbol standing beside a doorway, a reminder that some thresholds cannot be crossed unchanged. Perhaps the strangest aspect of these encounters is how difficult they are to categorize because they rarely behave like ordinary meetings. The individual details are often forgotten, yet the symbolic meaning remains intact, almost preserved, protected, as though the event was designed to communicate significance rather than information. This is why some researchers and storytellers alike have wondered whether certain encounters function differently than normal experience. Not people carrying meaning, but meaning carrying people for a brief moment. for a specific purpose, then gone. If archetypes exist beneath consciousness, then perhaps they occasionally surface, not in dreams, not in myths, but in life itself, not as supernatural beings, not as spirits, but as experiences shaped around symbolism, a guide appearing during confusion, a stranger delivering a warning, a figure representing transition, a messenger standing at the edge of change. Perhaps these encounters feel important because they are, not necessarily because of who appeared, but because of what appeared through them. The pattern, the meaning, the archetype itself, briefly visible, then hidden once more. Perhaps some people enter our lives for only a few moments, not because they are unimportant, but because they were never meant to stay, like a sentence spoken by reality itself, brief, necessary, then gone. And years later, when the memory returns, you may discover that what remains is not the person, it is the meaning, the strange certainty that the encounter was never entirely about them, and perhaps it was never entirely about you either. There are places that seem to remember something, a road that feels watched, a forest that feels older than it should, an abandoned structure that changes the atmosphere around it. Nothing visible, nothing obvious, only a feeling, as though the location itself is waiting, patiently, silently, for someone to arrive. And in the next entry of the Veil Archives, we investigate places that seem to possess a presence all their own, not haunted, not cursed, but aware in ways we do not understand. The next Veil Archives entry, the places that wait, Forbidden's locations. Some locations are not abandoned. They are simply waiting.